Y'all ever run into someone who flips your whole damn world in a single moment? I'm Joan Doe, your old storyteller from Hudson, New York, spinning tales that hit you right in the heart. Tonight, we're diving into a New Orleans love story that's all fire, grit, and a spark that could burn down the bayou. Picture this, a nurse with a voice like a gospel hymn and a tech guy with a chip on his shoulder, thrown together by fate or maybe just a damn kidney stone. Let's see how it all begins. The Atlanta airport was a chaotic mess, a swarm of bodies weaving through terminals under the drone of overhead announcements. Zuri Johnson, 32, dragged her worn-out backpack, its straps fraying like her patience. She'd just pulled a 72-hour shift at a hospice in rural Georgia, holding hands, wiping tears, and singing gospel to folks taking their final breaths. Her deep brown eyes, usually sharp as a preacher's sermon, were dulled by exhaustion, shadowed under the braid crown she'd twisted tight that morning. Her sneakers scuffed the linoleum, each step a prayer to get her ass back to Treme, New Orleans, where her bed and a plate of her mama's jambalaya were waiting. The air smelled of stale coffee and cheap perfume, and the fluorescent lights buzzed like a swarm of pissed-off bees. Zuri wasn't one for fuss. Her faded jeans and loose cotton shirt screamed practical, not flashy, and the silver adinkra ring on her left hand etched with a symbol for strength. A gift from her late grandma was the only shine she carried. She'd learned young that life wasn't about what you wore, but what you did. Especially after Leon, her jazz musician ex, left her heart in pieces for a shot at fame. Now, her world was her patience, her church choir, and the Treme community that raised her. Love. That was a luxury she couldn't afford, not after it burned her once. She glanced at her boarding pass, Group D, Seat 23C, Economy, back of the plane, probably next to a crying baby or a guy who'd talk her ear off about crypto. Figures, she muttered, slumping against a pillar near the gate. The line for the New Orleans flight was a mix of tourists in Mardi Gras tees and business types with sleek briefcases, all itching to board. Zuri pulled out a dog-eared copy of Their Eyes Were Watching God, but before she could crack it open, a commotion cut through the terminal noise. "Sir, you need a wheelchair. Please," a flight attendant said, her voice tight with worry. "I don't need a damn wheelchair," a man growled, deep and strained, like he was chewing gravel. "Just get me on the plane." Zuri's head snapped up. Across the gate, a tall guy in a tailored linen shirt, dark green, sleeves rolled to his elbows, was doubled over, one hand braced on a chair, the other clutching his side. Pain twisted his face, sweat beading on his brow. But even through the agony, he radiated a quiet intensity. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass, his eyes a stormy gray-green that flickered with defiance. The shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, hinted at a lean, muscled frame, and his boots, scuffed but high-end, screamed money. A platinum watch glinted on his wrist, probably worth more than Zuri's rent for a year. "Sir, I insist," the attendant started. I said no. He straightened, swaying, his face paling to a sickly shade. The crowd parted, some staring, others pretending not to notice. Zuri's nursing instincts kicked in like a reflex. She was at his side in 3 strides, backpack thumping against her hip. "Excuse me," she said to the flustered attendant, her voice calm but firm, like she was soothing a patient. "I'm a nurse. Let me help." Before either could respond, The man's knees buckled. Zuri caught him, her 5'6" frame stronger than it looked, guiding him to a seat with a gentleness that belied her no-nonsense vibe. He was heavy, all lean muscle, and the heat of his skin seeped through his shirt as she eased him down. "Kidney stone?" she asked, clocking the way he gripped his abdomen. "Had 'em before." He gasped, teeth gritted. "Fucking hell. It's worse this time." Zuri nodded, slipping into professional mode, her exhaustion shoved to the back burner. Deep breaths. Man, when this shit start? She knelt in front of him, her eyes scanning his face for signs of shock. 2 damn hours ago, he said, voice tight. "Just get me to NOLA. My doctor's there. Flying with this kind of pain ain't smart," she said, her tone steady but soft, like she was talking down a scared kid. "Altitude can make it worse, especially if it's blocking your ureter." "I know the risks," he snapped. But his eyes, those stormy gray-greens, met hers, and something flickered in them. Not just pain, but a raw, unguarded need. "Got deals to close tomorrow. Can't miss 'em." The gate agent hustled over, nervous as a cat in a rainstorm. "Mr. Whitman, we're holding the flight. But we got aboard now if you're traveling." "Whitman." The name clicked in Zuri's head. Xavier Whitman, tech hotshot, the guy who built apps that ran half the hospitals in the South. She'd seen his name in a magazine once, some Forbes list of self-made millionaires. Not a billionaire CEO, but a lone wolf developer who'd struck gold and stayed out of the spotlight. "What's your seat?" she asked, ignoring the agent's fidgeting. 1A, the agent said. "First class." "No medical staff on board?" Zuri asked. The agent shook her head. "No, ma'am." Zuri took a breath, her mind racing. She wasn't about to let this guy pass out mid-flight and crash her one shot at getting home. "Mr. Whitman, I'm in 23C. I'll switch with you. Economy's closer to the bathroom, and I can keep an eye on you." His pain-clouded eyes widened, surprise cutting through the haze. "Why the hell would you do that?" "'Cause you're hurtin', and it's what I do," she said, simple as that. "Hospice nurse. Comfort's my thing." For a split second, his guard dropped, vulnerability softening the hard lines of his face. Then another wave of pain hit, and he doubled over, cursing under his breath. "Fine," he gasped. "Do it." Minutes later, the agent had swapped their seats, and Zuri guided Xavier down the jetway, ignoring the stares from passengers clutching their carry-ons. He leaned on her, his weight heavy but not crushing, his breath ragged against her ear. The cabin was dim, the hum of engines a low growl as she settled him by the window in 23C. She handed him a bottle of water, her movements quick and sure, and briefed the flight attendants on his condition, her voice cutting through their nervous chatter like a blade. "Name's Zuri Johnson," she said, sliding into the seat beside him, her backpack stuffed under the chair. "Figure we should know each other if I'm playing doctor. Xavier Whitman," he muttered, teeth still clenched. "And you already knew that, didn't you?" "Only after she said your name," Zuri admitted, unfazed. "I don't read TechCrunch for fun." He studied her, searching for a lie, but found none. A faint smirk tugged at his lips, despite the pain. "Refreshing," he said, voice low, like he meant it. As the plane taxied, Zuri dug into her backpack and pulled out a small pouch. "Essential oils," she said, catching his skeptical look. "Peppermint for pain and nausea." She dabbed a few drops on a tissue and handed it to him. Breathe deep. He hesitated, then complied, inhaling the sharp, clean scent. Pressure points, too, she said, taking his right hand, her fingers, cool and steady, pressed firmly between his thumb and forefinger. A slow, deliberate motion that sent a jolt through him, not just from the relief, but from her touch. Her skin was smooth against his, the adinkra ring glinting under the cabin's soft light. And for a moment the pain faded to a dull hum. The plane's engines roared, but all Xavier could hear was the faint rhythm of her breathing, steady as a metronome. "Why hospice?" he asked suddenly, his voice rough, trying to distract himself as the plane climbed. Zuri's eyes flicked to his, steady and unguarded. "'Cause everybody deserves to go out with dignity," she said. "And it teaches you what matters ain't stock portfolios or fancy watches. It's the people you hold close." Her words landed like a punch, not cruel, but true. And Xavier felt something shift, a crack in the walls he'd built around himself. He was 38, a tech prodigy who'd turned code into millions, but his life was a hollow shell. His mom, dead 5 years from cancer, had been his anchor, and he'd let her slip away, too busy chasing deals to sit by her bedside. No wife, no kids, just a loft in the warehouse district and a string of exes who wanted his wallet more than his heart. Zuri's presence, calm, real, unbought, was like a light cutting through fog, and it scared the hell out of him. The 3-hour flight passed in a blur. Zuri tended to him quietly, checking his pulse, keeping him hydrated, her hands moving with a grace that felt personal, not just professional. When the pain spiked, she distracted him with stories, not the grim details of her patients' deaths, but the moments that made them human. An old man who'd taught her to play dominoes, a woman who danced with her son one last time. "People show you who they really are at the end," she said, her voice soft against the cabin's hum. "No bullshit, just truth." "What do they regret most?" Xavier asked, his voice barely above a whisper, the question slipping out before he could stop it. "Not lovin' enough," she said without missing a beat. "Missin' the moments that matter, family, friends, the stuff you can't buy." Her eyes held his, unflinching, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just them. The plane's rumble, fading to nothing. As the plane descended, Xavier's pain eased to a dull ache, manageable, but still there. More surprising was the quiet in his head, no thoughts of contracts or code, just Zuri's voice, her stories, the way her ring caught the light. "We're landing soon," she said, gathering her things. "Get to your doctor. Pronto. Have dinner with me," he blurted, the words out before he could think. Zuri blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me." "Tonight," he said, softer now. His eyes locked on hers. "As a thank you. Just dinner." She studied him, her expression unreadable, like she was weighing his soul. "Xavier," she said, dropping the formalities. "I appreciate it, but I don't need a reward. This is my job, not on your day off. Given up a first-class seat," he countered, a hint of a smile breaking through. "Please." The plane bumped onto the tarmac, and passengers stirred, phones buzzing to life. Xavier's lit up with notifications. Marcus, his partner, probably freaking out about a deadline, but he ignored it. His focus on Zuri. She sighed, her lips twitching like she was fighting a smile. I'm beat, man. Been working 3 days straight. Probably smell like hospital funk. I just want to crash for 12 hours. Tomorrow. Then, he pressed, leaning closer, the faint cedar of his cologne mixing with the peppermint still lingering between them. Her eyebrow arched, amusement flickering in her eyes. You don't quit, do you? It's how I built my life, he said, letting that smirk slip free. One of my better traits, or so I'm told. That earned a soft laugh, warm like a summer night. I'll think about it, she said, pulling a business card from her wallet. My cell's on there, but see your doctor first. All right. The plane reached the gate, and passengers surged to their feet. Zuri stood, slinging her backpack over her shoulder, her braids swinging like a pendulum. Zuri, Xavier called as she turned to go. She glanced back, those tired but kind eyes meeting his. Thank you, he said, the words heavy with something he couldn't name. Her smile was real, transforming her worn-out face into something radiant. You're welcome. Xavier. Feel better? She walked down the aisle, her sneakers scuffing softly, and disappeared into the crowd. Xavier sat there, the card in his hand. Her name, Zuri Johnson, RN. Crescent City Hospice, burned into his brain. The pain in his side was still there, but it was nothing compared to the ache of watching her go. For the first time in years. Xavier Wittmann, a man who had everything and cared for nothing, felt like he'd just lost something he couldn't afford to let slip away. Mr. Joan Doe's outro, Zuri, just walked away from a spark that could set her world on fire. But will she look back? That's where the story's heading. Folks a love that might just shake the soul of New Orleans. Drop a comment, would you bet on a stranger like Xavier? Or play it safe like Zuri, smash that subscribe button to catch the next chapter. 'Cause this fire's just getting started. The Treme Hospice was a quiet haven, tucked on a corner lot where the air smelled of magnolia and antiseptic. Zuri Johnson slipped into the dim room of Miss Ruby, a 78-year-old patient whose laughter still carried the spark of a Mardi Gras queen. The old woman's hands, frail but warm, gripped Zuri's as she adjusted the IV drip. Sing me something, baby. Ruby rasped, her eyes glinting under the fluorescent glow. Zuri smiled, her voice rising soft and low with amazing grace, the notes weaving through the hum of medical machines like a prayer. The light from a cracked window caught her braided hair, casting shadows that danced on the wall, and for a moment, the weight of her 72-hour shift in Atlanta felt lighter. But as the last note faded, Zuri's mind drifted to Leon, her ex, a jazz trumpeter who'd promised her forever and then ditched her for a tour in Paris. His betrayal had left scars deeper than she'd admit, a reminder that love could burn as fast as it bloomed. She pushed the thought away, focusing on Ruby's smile, but her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her back to the present. She ignored it, knowing who it was. Xavier Wittmann, the tech guy from the plane, had been blowing up her voicemail since they landed in New Orleans 3 days ago. Persistent as hell, she'd give him that. Back at her shotgun house on Ursulines Avenue. Zuri kicked off her sneakers and collapsed onto the couch, the creak of old floorboards a familiar comfort. The place was small, cluttered with vinyl records and framed photos of her family, her mama's smile, her daddy's stern preacher gaze, her sister Tasha's law school graduation. The adinkra ring on her finger glinted as she scrolled through her phone. Xavier's latest message blinking Zuri. Lunch tomorrow, Galatoire's, 1 p.m. I owe you. She snorted, muttering, "Owe me my ass." She didn't trust guys like him rich. Smooth-talking, with eyes that saw too much. But something about Xavier on that plane, the way his guard cracked when she held his hand, stuck with her. He wasn't just some tech bro flexing his wallet. There was a hunger in him, a need for something real. Still, she'd been burned before, and she wasn't about to let a pretty face and a fat bank account mess with her head. Her phone buzzed again, this time a call from Miss Evelyn, the matriarch of Treme who ran the community garden like a general. "Girl, you ignoring that man's calls." Evelyn's voice was all gravel and wisdom, cutting through the static. "How the hell you know about that?" Zuri asked, sitting up. "Word travels. Baby. He's been asking around about you. Sounds like he's got it bad." Zuri rolled her eyes, but a smile tugged at her lips. "He's just grateful I kept him from passing out on a plane. Ain't no love story here." "Mm-hmm," Evelyn said, skeptical. "You're too young to be this damn cynical. Give the man a chance, but keep your eyes open. Rich boys like to play." Zuri hung up, staring at Xavier's message. Against her better judgment, she typed back, "Fine, 1 p.m. Don't make me regret this." She hit send before she could overthink it, her heart kicking up like a drumbeat. Galatoire's was a French Quarter institution, its green and white facade a beacon of Creole elegance. Inside, the dining room buzzed with clinking glasses and the hum of old money, the air thick with the scent of gumbo and grilled redfish. Zuri stepped through the door, her navy sundress hugging her curves, the hem brushing her knees. She'd let her braids fall loose, framing her face, and the adinkra ring caught the chandelier's glow as she scanned the room. Heads turned, some curious, some judging, but she held her chin high, used to the stares that came with being a black woman in spaces like this. Xavier was already at a corner table, standing as she approached, his presence commanding despite the casual linen shirt and jeans. The green of his shirt brought out the storm in his gray-green eyes, and his hair, still a little messy, gave him a boyish edge that didn't match the intensity rolling off him. "Zuri," he said, his voice low and warm, like a shot of bourbon. "You look incredible." "Don't start with the charm," she said, sliding into her chair, though her lips twitched. "I'm here for the food, not your sweet talk." He chuckled, a deep rumble that sent a shiver down her spine. Fair enough. "The gumbo's worth the trip." The waiter poured water, rattling off specials with a practiced drawl, and Zuri ordered the shrimp remoulade, keeping her eyes on the menu to avoid Javier's gaze. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't crack. "So," he said, "how's the hospice life?" "You sing for all your patients like you probably did for that old lady I bet you saw this morning." Her eyes flicked up, surprised he'd guessed that close. "Miss Ruby," she said, nodding. "She loves gospel. Makes her smile, even on the bad days. And yeah, it's tough, but it's real. What about you building apps to save the world or just stacking cash?" He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. Trying to save the world. Maybe. Got a project for free medical records in low-income clinics. Inspired by folks like you. Actually, she raised an eyebrow, skeptical but intrigued. Don't bullshit me. Whitman, you don't even know me. I know you gave up a first-class seat for a stranger, he said, his voice dropping. Serious now. That's more than most would do. The air between them thickened, the clatter of the restaurant fading to a dull hum. Zuri's pulse quickened, and she cursed herself for it. Before she could respond, a woman at a nearby table, blonde, dripping in pearls, leaned to her friend, her whisper loud enough to carry. She's with him. Gotta be after his money. Zuri's jaw tightened, her fingers gripping the water glass. She'd heard worse snide comments on the streetcar, backhanded compliments at church fundraisers, but this stung. Maybe because Xavier was watching her, waiting for her reaction. She set the glass down, her voice low and sharp. You hear that shit? Xavier. That's what people think when they see us together. So let's get one thing straight. I don't give a damn about your bank account. His face darkened, not with anger at her, but at the table of whispers. Zuri, I don't give a shit what they think, and I know you're not here for my money. Hell, I'm the one scared you're too real for me. Her breath caught, his honesty hitting like a freight train. Scared, she said, leaning forward, her eyes boring into his. Of what? That I won't fall for your tech bro charm, that you'll see through it, he said, quieter now, his gaze unflinching. I've been burned before. Zuri, exes who wanted my wallet. Not me. You're different. And it's throwing me off. The waiter arrived with their food, breaking the tension. But Zuri's heart was still racing. The remoulade was tangy, the gumbo rich, but she barely tasted it. Her mind on Xavier's words. He wasn't what she'd expected, not smug, not slick, just raw, like a nerve exposed. She wanted to push back, keep her walls up, but the way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the room, was chipping away at her defenses. As they ate, the conversation shifted to lighter ground, her love for Nina Simone. His secret obsession with po' boys, but the undercurrent of something deeper lingered. She caught him staring at her hands, the way her fingers moved when she talked, and it sent a warmth through her she didn't want to name. When the check came, he slid his card in without looking, but she noticed the way his knee brushed hers under the table. Accidental, but electric. They stepped outside, the French Quarter alive with street musicians and the hum of tourists. The sky had turned gray, a light drizzle starting to fall, slicking the cobblestones. Xavier pulled out an umbrella, holding it over her, and they walked toward her streetcar stop, the air cool and heavy with the scent of rain and beignets from a nearby cafe. So, he said, his voice cutting through the patter of rain, you gonna let me see you again? Or am I still on probation? She laughed, the sound softer than she meant. You're pushy as hell. You know that, guilty, he said, grinning, but his eyes were serious, searching. I don't want to mess this up. Zuri. Before she could answer, her foot slipped on the wet stone, and she stumbled. Xavier caught her, his hand firm on her shoulder, the heat of his touch searing through her damp dress. For a moment, they stood there, close enough to feel each other's breath, the umbrella tilting as raindrops slid down its edge. His fingers lingered, tracing the curve of her shoulder, and Zuri's skin prickled, her pulse hammering. The street lamp's golden glow caught the rain, making it shimmer like beads at Mardi Gras, and the distant wail of a saxophone mixed with the soft rhythm of their breathing. "Don't mess with me." "Xavier," she said, her voice low, almost a warning. But her body betrayed her. Leaning into his touch, "I'm not," he murmured, his thumb brushing her collarbone, a slow, deliberate motion that sent a shiver down her spine. "I'm trying to keep up with you." She stepped back, breaking the spell, her heart pounding like a second-line drum. "I gotta go," she said, adjusting her bag, the rain cool against her flushed skin. "I'll call you." He nodded, letting her go. But his eyes followed her as she boarded the streetcar, the umbrella still dripping in his hand. Zuri sank into a seat, the glass fogging with her breath, and watched him disappear into the crowd, his silhouette sharp against the neon of Bourbon Street. Her shoulders still burned where he touched her, and she cursed under her breath, knowing she was in deeper than she'd planned. Back at the hospice that evening, Zuri was checking Miss Ruby's chart when a familiar figure leaned against the doorframe. Leon, her ex, all lanky charm and trumpet-calloused fingers, flashed a grin that used to melt her. "Heard you were back." "Z," he said, his voice smooth as a jazz riff. "Got a gig at Preservation Hall tomorrow. Want to sing with me?" Like old times. Her stomach twisted, memories of late-night jam sessions and broken promises flooding back. "I'm good." "Leon," she said, her tone flat. "Got enough on my plate." His grin faltered, but he shrugged. "Your loss, baby. You know you belong on that stage." She turned away, focusing on the chart. But his words lingered, stirring doubts she didn't want to face. Her phone buzzed. Xavier, texting, "Thanks for lunch. Preservation Hall tomorrow. I hear it's the real deal." She stared at the screen, torn between the past and the pull of something new, her finger hovering over the reply button. The Preservation Hall was a sweat-soaked cathedral of sound, tucked in a French Quarter alley where the air pulsed with trumpet wails and the tang of spilled bourbon. Zuri Johnson stepped inside, the worn wooden floor creaking under her boots, her red dress clinging to her curves like a second skin. The dress was bold, a deep crimson that caught the dim stage lights, and she'd let her braids fall loose, swaying like a rhythm of their own. At 32, she knew how to carry herself head high, shoulders back, unbothered by the eyes that followed her. But tonight, her stomach was a knot, tangled with nerves and something she didn't want to name. Xavier Whitman was meeting her here, and the thought of him in this space, her space, where she'd sung with Leon, loved with Leon, lost with Leon, felt like walking a tightrope. The hall was packed, bodies pressed close. The crowd a mix of locals in faded tees and tourists clutching hurricanes. The band was mid-set, a trombone growling low while the drummer snapped a beat that made Zuri's hips itch to move. She scanned the room, her adinkra ring glinting as she gripped her clutch, and spotted Xavier near the bar, leaning against a pillar like he owned the place. He wasn't flashy jeans, a black button-down rolled to his elbows, hair still a little messy, but those gray-green eyes locked on her the second she walked in, cutting through the haze like a spotlight. He straightened, a slow smile spreading, and damn if it didn't make her heart skip. "Zuri," he said, closing the distance, his voice a low rumble that fought the music for her attention. "You look like trouble," says the guy who's been blowing up my phone all week. She shot back, her lips twitching. "You clean up nice. Wit man." He grinned, a flash of teeth that was more boyish than she expected. "Had to step up for you. This place is something else." He glanced around, taking in the peeling posters, the sweat-slicked musicians, the raw energy that made Preservation Hall a legend. "Feels alive." "It is," she said, her voice softening. "This is home." She didn't mean just the Hall New Orleans. Treme, the music that ran through her veins like blood. But the way Xavier looked at her, like he was trying to memorize every word, made her wonder if he heard more than she said. They grabbed drinks, whiskey for him, a gin fizz for her, and found a spot near the stage, the music wrapping around them like a warm blanket. Zuri felt the rhythm in her bones, her foot tapping, and for a moment, she forgot the doubts that had kept her up last night. Leon's text, his damn invitation to sing, had stirred memories she'd buried nights like this. His trumpet in her ear, his hands on her waist. She'd loved him hard, and he'd left her harder. Xavier wasn't Leon, but the fear of falling again, of trusting someone who lived in a different world, gnawed at her. "You ever been on that stage?" Xavier asked, nodding toward the band, his shoulder brushing hers as he leaned in to be heard. She hesitated, the question pulling her back. "Used to," she said, her voice tight. "Sang with a guy I knew, jazz, gospel, whatever the crowd wanted." Knew his eyes narrowed, catching the shift in her tone. "X," she said, short and sharp, hoping he'd leave it there. He didn't. "He the reason you're so damn guarded?" She turned, her eyes flashing. "You don't get to psychoanalyze me. Xavier, I'm here, ain't I?" "That's enough for now." He held her gaze, unflinching, but nodded. "Fair enough, but I'm not going anywhere." "Zuri." The words landed heavy, a promise she wasn't ready to trust. Before she could respond, the band wrapped their set, and a familiar figure stepped onto the stage. Leon, all lanky swagger and easy charm, his trumpet gleaming under the lights. His locks were pulled back, his smile as disarming as ever, and Zuri's stomach dropped. She hadn't told Xavier about Leon's gig, hadn't wanted to admit she'd agreed to come partly to prove she could face her past. "Evening, y'all," Leon drawled, his voice smooth as molasses. "Got a special guest tonight, Zuri Johnson. Where you at? Come bless us with that voice." The crowd whooped, heads turning, and Zuri froze, her gin fizz halfway to her lips. Xavier's jaw tightened, his eyes flicking from Leon to her. "You knew he'd be here," he said, not a question. "I didn't plan this," she muttered, but the heat in her cheeks betrayed her. She set her drink down, her heart pounding, and made her way to the stage, every step heavier than the last. The crowd parted, their cheers a roar in her ears, and Leon's grin widened as she climbed up, his hand brushing her arm like it still belonged there. "Summertime," he said, low enough for just her to hear. "Like old times. Z, don't," she said, her voice a warning, but she took the mic, the weight of it grounding her. The band kicked in, a slow, sultry groove, and Zuri closed her eyes, letting the music take her. Her voice rose, rich and haunting, weaving through the trumpet's mournful cry. Summertime, and the livin' is easy. The words poured out, her body swaying, the red dress catching the stage lights like a flame. The crowd was hers, swaying with her, but all she felt was Xavier's gaze, burning from the back of the room. When the song ended, the hall erupted, whistles and claps shaking the walls. Leon stepped close, his arm slipping around her waist, lingering too long, too familiar. Still got it. Z, he murmured, his breath hot against her ear. She pulled away, her smile tight, and stepped off the stage, her boots thudding on the wood. Xavier was waiting, his posture rigid, his drink untouched. "You're a damn star," he said, but his voice was clipped, his eyes dark with something that wasn't just admiration. "Don't start," she said, brushing past him. The crowd's noise swallowing her words. She needed air, needed to get out of this pressure cooker before she said something she'd regret. She pushed through the back door into the alley, the night cool and sharp with the scent of wet stone and jasmine. The muffled saxophone followed her, a low wail that matched the churn in her chest. Xavier was right behind her, his boots scuffing the gravel. "Zuri, hold up. What the hell was that?" She spun, her braids swinging, the moonlight catching the fire in her eyes. "What was what me singing? Or your ass getting jealous over nothing? That guy's still got a thing for you," he said, stepping closer, his voice low and tight. "I saw how he looked at you, how he touched you. I ain't blind. Leon's my past," she snapped, her hands on her hips. "You're mine now, Xavier. But you gotta trust me, or we're done before we even start." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched into every line of his face. "Trust ain't easy when I'm falling for you, Zuri. And seeing him up there, acting like he still owns you, it's fucking with me." Her breath caught, his words hitting like a spark to dry tinder. "You're falling for me," she said, softer now, the anger giving way to something raw. "Hell yeah," he said, closing the gap until they were inches apart, the alley's shadows wrapping around them. "You think I'm here for the jazz? I'm here for you." She stared up at him, her heart a drumbeat, the saxophone's wail from inside curling through the air like a lover's call. "If you want me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "show me." He didn't hesitate. His hands found her waist, pulling her into a slow, deliberate dance, their bodies swaying to the music leaking through the door. The red dress slid against her skin, and his fingers, warm and sure, pressed into her hips, tracing the curve through the thin fabric. Her hands landed on his chest, feeling the steady thump of his heart. And she tipped her head back, her braids brushing his arm. The moonlight painted their faces in silver, the alley's damp air cool against the heat building between them. His breath grazed her temple, a soft hitch that matched the saxophone's mournful climb, and for a moment, the world was just them two souls caught in a rhythm older than time. "Don't make me fall if you ain't ready to catch me," she murmured, her lips close to his jaw, the stubble rough against her cheek. "I'm ready," he said, his voice a low growl, his hands tightening on her waist. "I'm all in, Zuri." She pulled back, just enough to meet his eyes, searching for the lie. She didn't find one, but trust was a bridge she wasn't sure she could cross. I gotta know you mean it, she said, stepping out of his arms, the cool night air rushing into the space between them. Words ain't enough. He nodded, his gaze steady, like he was making a vow. Then let me prove it. Preservation Hall's just the start. Come with me to the bayou this weekend. There's a project I'm working on, medical app for clinics like yours. I want you to see it. She hesitated, her mind flashing to Leon, to the whispers at Galatoire's, to the walls she'd built to keep her heart safe. But Xavier's eyes, raw and open, were a challenge she couldn't ignore. All right, she said, her voice firm, but you fuck this up. Wittmann, I'm gone. Deal, he said, a small smile breaking through, like he'd just won something worth fighting for. As they headed back inside, the band struck up a new tune, fast and wild, and Zuri felt a shift, like the ground under her was moving. She didn't know where this was going, but for the first time in years, she wanted to find out. The French Quarter was a riot of color and chaos, Mardi Gras turning the streets into a pulsing heartbeat of New Orleans. Zuri Johnson wove through the crowd, her purple silk dress shimmering under the gas lamps, the hem swirling around her knees like a second-line dancer. She'd woven magnolia flowers into her braids, their creamy petals stark against her dark hair, and her adinkra ring glinted as she adjusted the feathered mask perched on her face. At 32, she knew how to move through a party confident, unbothered, her laugh carrying over the brass bands and drunken shouts. But tonight, her chest was tight, a mix of thrill and dread. Xavier Wittmann was by her side, his own mask a sleek black number, doing little to hide the intensity in his gray-green eyes. They were stepping into the heart of her city, but also into a world where their differences could cut deeper than a bayou blade. Xavier looked damn good, she had to admit. His linen shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, hugged his lean frame, and the fedora tilted on his head gave him a roguish charm that didn't belong in his tech world. He carried a string of gold beads, tossing them to a group of kids who squealed and scrambled. And the grin he flashed Zuri was pure trouble. "This place is wild," he said, his voice fighting the blare of a trumpet from a nearby float. "You do this every year, born and raised," she said, catching a bead thrown from a balcony and looping it around his neck. "Mardi Gras ain't just a party. Xavier, it's family, history, soul. You keep up or get left behind. I'm keeping up," he said, his hand brushing her lower back, a light touch that sent a spark through her. "Long as you're leadin'." Her laugh was sharp, but the warmth in his eyes made her pause. Since that night at Preservation Hall, when they danced under the moonlight and he'd laid his feelings bare, Zuri had felt the ground shifting. Xavier wasn't Leon, wasn't the type to run when things got real, but he was still a man from a world of lofts and private jets, while she was Treme through and through, gospel, gumbo, and grit. The whispers at Galatoire's, the way Leon's presence had stirred Xavier's jealousy, lingered like a storm cloud. She wanted to trust him, but trust was a gamble, and she'd lost too many hands to bet lightly. They moved through the quarter, the air thick with the scent of fried dough and spilled beer, the crowd a blur of masks and sequins. A second-line band marched past, drums pounding, and Zuri swayed to the rhythm, pulling Xavier into the flow. He stumbled at first, laughing, but matched her steps, his hands finding her hips as they moved with the parade. The beads around her neck clinked, the streetlights casting their shadows in a wild dance. And for a moment, it was just them two souls, caught in the city's heartbeat. But the night wasn't just about street parties. Xavier had been invited to a VIP bash at a Garden District mansion, hosted by Vanessa Tremaine, his ex and a big-shot event planner who moved in circles Zuri only saw in magazines. "You sure about this?" Zuri asked as they boarded a streetcar, the clatter of wheels drowning out the fading parade. "Your fancy friends ain't exactly my crowd." "They're not my friends," he said, his voice firm, his hand squeezing hers. "Just business. Vanessa's got pull with investors for my app. We show up, shake hands, get out. You good?" She nodded, but her gut twisted. Long as they don't pull that Galatoire's bullshit again. "They won't," he said, his jaw tight. "Not with me there." The mansion was a vision of old Southern wealth, white columns, wrought iron gates, chandeliers spilling light like liquid gold. Inside, the ballroom was a sea of tailored suits and glittering gowns, the air heavy with perfume and the clink of champagne flutes. Zuri felt every eye on her as they entered, her purple dress a bold contrast to the muted elegance around her. Xavier's hand stayed at her back, steadying her, but the whispers followed like a shadow. "Who's she, Whitman's new fling? Doesn't look like she belongs." Vanessa swept toward them, a vision in emerald satin, her blonde hair swept up, her smile sharp as a switchblade. "Xavier, darling," she said, air kissing his cheeks, her eyes sliding to Zuri. "And you must be Zuri. I've heard so much." "Bet you have," Zuri said, her voice cool, her mask now tucked into her clutch. She wasn't hiding tonight. Vanessa's smile didn't waver, but her gaze was calculating. "You're a nurse." "Yes." "How?" "Noble. We must get you to share your story tonight. Our guests love a good cause." Zuri's spine stiffened, sensing the trap, but Xavier cut in. His tone clipped. "Zuri's here as my guest. Vanessa, not a sideshow." "Of course," Vanessa said, her laugh like breaking glass. "Come, mingle. Everyone's dying to meet you." The next hour was a blur of introductions, investors with fake smiles, socialites dripping in diamonds, all sizing Zuri up like she was a curiosity. She held her own, her wit sharp. Her answers about her hospice work laced with a quiet fire that silenced the room. Xavier stayed close, his pride evident, but Zuri felt the weight of their stares, the unspoken question, "What's a girl like her doing with him?" Then Vanessa took the stage, her voice amplified by a mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, a special treat. Zuri Johnson, Xavier's companion, has a story to share about her work with the less fortunate. Zuri, come up." The room turned, 100 eyes pinning her in place. Zuri's blood ran hot, her fingers curling into fists. This wasn't about honoring her, it was a setup, a chance to make her feel small in front of Xavier's world. She glanced at him, expecting him to shut it down, but he looked as blindsided as she felt, his face darkening with anger. "Zuri, you don't have to," he started, but she was already moving, her heels clicking on the marble floor. If Vanessa wanted a show, she'd get one. She took the mic, her heart pounding, and faced the crowd, their faces a mix of curiosity and condescension. "Y'all want to hear about my work?" she said, her voice steady, cutting through the murmurs. "Fine. I'm a hospice nurse. I hold hands, wipe tears, sing gospel to folks taking their last breaths. But tonight, I ain't talking. I'm singing." She didn't wait for permission. Her voice rose, raw and powerful, with his eye as on the sparrow, a gospel hymn her grandma taught her. The notes soared, filling the ballroom, her body swaying as the words poured out grief, hope, defiance. The chandeliers seemed to dim, the room falling silent. Every face caught in her spell. Xavier stood frozen, his eyes burning with awe, and even Vanessa's smile faltered, her plan backfiring as Zuri owned the stage. When the last note faded, the crowd erupted, clapping, some wiping tears. Zuri handed the mic back to a stunned Vanessa and walked off, her head high, but inside, she was shaking. She'd shown them, but the cost was a wound she hadn't expected. Xavier caught her arm as she reached the edge of the room, his voice low. "Zuri, that was... Don't," she said, pulling free, her eyes flashing. "You let her put me on display like some damn charity case. Did you know she was going to pull that shit? Hell no," he said, stepping closer, his voice urgent. "I had no idea. Zuri, I'd never let anyone play you like that." "Then why didn't you stop it?" she snapped, her voice breaking. "You're supposed to have my back." "Xavier." Before he could answer, a man in a pinstripe suit, some investor with a whiskey-soaked grin, stumbled over. "Whitman, you got yourself a real firecracker," he slurred, eyeing Zuri like she was a prize. "But mixing with the help. That's a bold move." Xavier's fist clenched, but Zuri was faster. "Keep talking, asshole," she said, her voice ablade. "You'll need a nurse when I'm done with you." The man blinked, laughed nervously, and backed off. But the damage was done. Zuri turned and walked out, the humid night air hitting her like a slap as she stepped onto the mansion's lawn. She didn't get far. Fireworks exploded overhead, painting the sky in bursts of red and gold, and Xavier caught up to her in a cobblestone alley behind the house, the noise of the party muffled by ancient oaks. "Zuri." "Wait," he called, his voice raw, desperate. She spun, her dress flaring, the magnolias in her hair trembling. "What?" "Xavier," she said, her chest heaving. "You gonna tell me that didn't just happen? That your world ain't looking at me like I'm some gold-digging nobody?" He stepped closer, the fireworks casting shadows across his face, his mask gone, his eyes blazing. "You're not nobody," he said, his voice low, fierce. "You're everything. Zuri. And I fucked up. All right, I should have shut her down the second she opened her mouth." Her throat tightened, his words hitting harder than she wanted. "Then why didn't you?" she said, softer now, tears pricking her eyes. "I'm out here fighting to be seen, Xavier, and you're supposed to be in my corner." He closed the distance, his hands finding her arms, pulling her into him. His body was warm, solid, and he wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chest pressed against her back. "You're my whole damn world, Zuri," he murmured, his lips brushing her hair, his breath hot against her ear. The silk of her dress was thin, and she felt every inch of him, his heartbeat, his strength molding to her curves. His hands slid to her waist, fingers splaying, and the fireworks' boom echoed their ragged breaths, The red glow of a lantern in the alley bathing them in a sultry haze. The scent of jasmine and gunpowder hung heavy, and Zuri's skin burned where he touched her, a fire she couldn't douse. She turned in his arms, her hands gripping his shoulders, feeling the muscle beneath his shirt. "I can't do this if it's a lie," she said, her voice trembling, her face inches from his, the lantern's light catching the tears in her eyes. "It's not," he said, his forehead resting against hers, his voice a vow. "I'm yours, Zuri, all in." The moment stretched, charged, the fireworks fading to a distant crackle. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so bad it hurt. But the whispers, Vanessa's game, the investor's sneer, they were a wall she couldn't climb. She pushed him away, her hands shaking, the cool night air rushing between them. "I need time," she said, stepping back, her heels clicking on the stone. "And you need to figure out how to show up for me." He looked gutted, his hands hovering where she'd been, but he nodded. "I will," he said, his voice hoarse. "Whatever it takes." She turned and walked away, the alley swallowing her silhouette, the fireworks glow fading behind her. Her phone buzzed as she reached the streetcar. Tasha, her sister, texting. "Heard you're out with Mr. Tech Money." You good Zuri didn't reply. Her heart too raw, her mind replaying Xavier's touch, his words, the way he'd looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered. But the world he came from had just shown its teeth, and she wasn't sure she could survive its bite. The Crescent City Hospice in Treme was a sanctuary of soft beeps and whispered prayers, its halls lit by the pale glow of fluorescent bulbs. Zuri Johnson moved through it like a ghost, her sneakers silent on the linoleum, her braids pulled tight in a bun that matched the tension in her chest. It had been 3 days since the Mardi Gras fiasco, since Vanessa's stunt at the VIP party had left her raw, since Xavier's failure to shut it down had cracked something in her she didn't know could break. She'd told him she needed time, but time wasn't healing shit. It was just making the ache worse. She slipped into the room of Claude, a new patient, a 67-year-old fisherman with lung cancer and a laugh like a foghorn. His eyes, sharp despite the morphine, lit up as she checked his chart. "You look like you lost your best friend." "Share," he said, his Cajun drawl thick as bayou mud. "Wanna tell old Claude what's eatin' you?" Zuri forced a smile, adjusting his oxygen mask. "Just tired. Mr. Claude. Long week." "Bullshit," he said, coughing a laugh. "I know a broken heart when I see one. Spill it, girl." She hesitated, the weight of the last few days pressing down. Claude's room was small, the air heavy with antiseptic and the faint sweetness of pralines his daughter had left. A cracked window let in the hum of cicadas, and the monitor's green light pulsed like a heartbeat. "Man trouble," she admitted, her voice low. "Thought he was different. But he let me down when it mattered." Claude nodded, his hands folding over the blanket. "Love's a gamble. Share. I loved a woman once, white gal. Back when that was a scandal. Folks said we didn't belong, but we fought for it, till the day she passed. You want to know what I learned?" Zuri leaned closer, her eyes searching his. What love worth having don't come easy. He said, if he's fighting for you, give him a chance to make it right. Ain't no perfect man, just ones who try. His words hit like a gut punch, stirring memories of Xavier's voice in that alley, the way he'd held her like she was his world. She'd pushed him away, scared of being burned again. But the truth was, she missed him, his laugh, his stubbornness, the way he saw her, really saw her. She thanked Claude, her throat tight, and stepped into the hall, pulling a folded letter from her pocket. It was from Miss Ruby, her patient who'd passed last week, slipped to her by a nurse. Love without fear, child. It's the only way to live. Zuri's eyes stung, Ruby's words echoing Claude's, and she knew she couldn't keep running from what she felt. Her phone buzzed Tasha, her sister, texting, "You still ghosting that tech guy? Mama's asking questions." Zuri ignored it, her mind elsewhere. She'd agreed to sing gospel tonight at a small community gathering in the Bayou St. John, a cluster of shacks where folks held church under the stars. It was a chance to clear her head, to let the music carry her pain. She didn't expect Xavier to show up, didn't expect him to fight for her. But damn if she didn't hope. The bayou was a world apart from the French Quarter, its cypress trees draped in Spanish moss, the air thick with the chirp of crickets and the earthy scent of swamp water. Zuri stood in a weathered shack, its tin roof rattling under a sudden downpour, her voice rising with wade in the water as a dozen locals clapped and swayed. Her white blouse was damp from the humidity, clinging to her skin, and her braids swung as she poured her soul into the hymn. The shack's single oil lamp cast a golden glow, making her adinkra ring shimmer, and the rain's steady drumbeat wove into her song like a second voice. She didn't see him at first. The door creaked open, and Xavier Whitman stepped inside, soaked to the bone, his black shirt plastered to his chest, his hair dripping into his gray-green eyes. The crowd barely noticed, lost in the music. But Zuri's voice faltered, just for a heartbeat. He looked like he'd walked through hell to get here, his boots caked with mud, his face raw with something that wasn't just exhaustion. She finished the song, the final note hanging in the air, and the locals clapped, their voices rising in amens as they filed out into the rain, leaving her alone with him. "What the hell are you doing here, Xavier?" she said, crossing her arms, her voice sharp but trembling. The lamp's flicker danced across her face, highlighting the hurt in her eyes. He stepped closer, water dripping onto the wooden floor, his breath uneven. "I fucked up. Zuri," he said, his voice rough, like he'd been shouting into the void. "I should have had your back at that party. Should have shut Vanessa down before she opened her damn mouth. I'm here to make it right." She laughed, sharp and bitter, but her eyes were wet. "Make it right. You let those people treat me like a prop. Xavier, like I was some charity case you dragged in to look good." "I know," he said, his hands clenching, his shirt creaking as he moved. "I was so caught up in the deal, in keeping investors happy. I didn't see what was happening. That's on me, but I'm done with that shit." Her brow arched, skeptical. "Done? What's that even mean?" He took a breath, stepping closer, the lamp's glow catching the scar above his eyebrow, a faint slash that made him look more human. "I killed a contract today," he said. "Big one. Millions. For a hospital chain that wanted my app to lock out low-income patients. I walked away. Zuri. 'Cause it wasn't right. 'Cause you showed me what right looks like." Her heart stuttered, his words slicing through her defenses. "You did what I'm building the app for clinics like yours," he said, his voice fierce now, his eyes locked on hers. "Free access. No strings. I don't give a damn about the money. I care about you. About us." The rain pounded harder, a roar that drowned out the crickets, and Zuri's chest tightened, torn between anger and the pull of his honesty. "You can't just show up and say all the right shit." "Xavier," she said, her voice breaking. "I trusted you, and you let me down. I can't keep fighting to be seen." He dropped to his knees, right there in the mud-streaked shack, his hands hovering like he was afraid to touch her. "I see you, Zuri," he said, his voice raw, pleading. "I see the woman who sings like she's holding the world together, who fights for people nobody else remembers. I was a damn idiot to let you walk away, and I'll spend my life making it right if you let me." Her breath caught, tears spilling over despite her fight to hold them back. The lamp's light painted his face in gold and shadow, his soaked shirt clinging to every line of his body. And she saw the truth in his eyes. No games, no bullshit. Just a man laying himself bare. She stepped forward, her hands trembling, and pulled him to his feet, her fingers digging into his arms. "Don't break my heart, Xavier," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread. "Never, baby," he said. And then his lips were on hers, a kiss that stole her breath, deep and desperate, like he'd been starving for her. The rain roared outside, its rhythm matching their jagged breaths, and the oil lamp's flicker cast their shadows in a swaying dance across the walls. His hands slid to her face, cupping her cheeks, his thumbs brushing away her tears, and she pressed herself closer, her blouse damp against his chest, the heat of his skin searing through the fabric. Her fingers tangled in his wet hair, pulling him deeper into the kiss, and the taste of rain and whiskey on his tongue sent a shiver down her spine. The shack creaked, the world narrowing to the thud of their hearts, the soft moan in her throat, the way his hands trembled like he was holding something sacred. She pulled back, gasping, her lips swollen, her eyes blazing. "You mean this?" she said, her voice hoarse, searching his face for any hint of a lie. "More than anything," he said, his forehead resting against hers, his breath warm on her skin. "I love you, Zuri. I'm not going anywhere." The words hung there, heavy as the rain, and for the first time, she believed him, not because he was perfect, but because he was trying, fighting for her in a way Leon never had. She stepped back, her hands still on his arms, grounding herself against the storm in her chest. "You gotta meet my family," she said, her voice firm but soft. "Show me you're serious. Xavier, no more half-assing it. Name the time and place," he said, a small smile breaking through, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm ready." She nodded, wiping her tears, the rain slowing to a soft patter outside. "This is your last shot," she said. But the edge in her voice was gone, replaced by something warmer, something that felt like hope. As they stepped out of the shack, the bayou air cool against their skin, Zuri felt lighter, like she'd shed a weight she hadn't known she was carrying. The stars were out now, peeking through the clouds, and Xavier's hand brushed hers, a quiet promise. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Marcus, Xavier's friend and business partner, texting. "Heard X is chasing you down. Don't break him too bad." She smiled, slipping the phone away, and glanced at Xavier, his silhouette sharp against the moonlit swamp. "Ready to face my mama?" she asked, half teasing, as they walked toward his truck. "Scared shitless," he admitted, grinning. "But I'd walk through fire for you, Zuri." "Good," she said, her laugh soft but real. "You're gonna need that." The Treme community garden was a burst of life, its rows of tomatoes, collards, and sunflowers swaying under a late summer sun. The air was thick with the scent of fresh earth and sizzling jambalaya, the beat of a second-line band pulsing through the crowd at the annual harvest festival. Zuri Johnson stood at the heart of it, her yellow sundress glowing like a flame, the hem dancing around her calves as she handed out bags of produce to neighbors. Her braids were adorned with tiny gold beads, clicking softly as she moved, and her adinkra ring caught the sunlight, a symbol of the strength she'd carried through every storm. At 32, she was a pillar of this place nurse, singer, daughter of Treme, and today she felt it in her bones, the love of her people wrapping around her like a warm quilt. Xavier Wittmann was by her side, his linen shirt rolled to his elbows, a sheen of sweat on his brow as he hauled crates of okra with a grin that didn't belong to the tech hotshot she'd met on that plane 6 months ago. He'd traded his warehouse district loft for a Creole cottage they'd bought together, a fixer-upper on Dumaine Street with creaky floors and a backyard begging for a garden. The man who'd once chased million-dollar deals was now elbow-deep in dirt, joking with kids who called him Mr. X and taking orders from Miss Evelyn like a soldier. Zuri caught his eye, and the way he looked at her like she was the sun itself made her heart skip. Even now, the festival was their baby, a way to give back to the community that had raised her and welcomed him. Tables groaned under platters of red beans, cornbread, and crawfish etouffee, while a brass band played "When the Saints Go Marching In," the trumpets' wails soaring over laughter and chatter. Kids ran through the garden, clutching sunflowers, and elders swapped stories under a canopy strung with fairy lights. Zuri's sister, Tasha, was at the dessert table, sneaking beignets to her niece, while their parents, Elaine and Michael, mingled with neighbors, their pride in Zuri as clear as the noon sky. Marcus Taylor, Xavier's best friend and business partner, was manning a grill, his apron smeared with barbecue sauce as he teased Xavier about his soft hands. "Girl, you got this place looking like a damn paradise," Miss Evelyn said, sidling up to Zuri, her silver braids glinting as she surveyed the crowd. At 76, the community matriarch was a force, her eyes sharp enough to see through any bullshit. "And that man of yours ain't half bad neither." Zuri laughed, handing a bag of collards to a grandmother who thanked her with a hug. "He's trying," she said, glancing at Xavier as he helped a kid plant a sunflower seed, his laugh carrying over the music. "Took a minute, but he's learning how to keep up. Learning fast," Evelyn said, her voice sly. "You holding on to him tight as I need to," Zuri said. But her smile softened, since that night in the bayou, When Xavier had knelt in the rain and bared his soul, she'd let her walls crumble, piece by piece. He'd met her family, survived her daddy's preacher glare and her mama's endless questions, and proved his love wasn't just words. He'd poured his tech millions into a free medical app for clinics like hers, and he'd become a fixture in Treme, planting roots deeper than she'd thought possible. But the whispers from that Mardi Gras party, the sting of Vanessa's betrayal, still lingered, a reminder that love was a fight, not a fairy tale. The band shifted to a slower tune. Do you know what it means to miss New Orleans? And Zuri felt a pull, like the city itself was singing to her. She moved through the crowd, checking on volunteers, her dress catching the breeze, her beads clicking like a soft percussion. Xavier caught her hand, pulling her toward a quiet corner of the garden, his touch warm and sure. "You're running this like a damn general," he said, his gray-green eyes twinkling. "Take a break. Zuri, dance with me." She raised an eyebrow, teasing. "You think you can keep up with a Treme girl on her home turf?" "Try me," he said, his grin pure mischief. They swayed to the music, his hands on her hips, her arms looping around his neck. The sun warmed her skin, the grass tickling her bare feet, and the crowd's chatter faded to a hum. His shirt smelled of cedar and sweat, and she felt the steady thump of his heart, a rhythm that matched her own. "You're getting too comfortable," she murmured, her lips brushing his ear, a playful challenge. "Damn right," he said, his voice low, his fingers tightening on her waist. "Got you to thank for that." The moment was perfect, but Zuri knew perfection never lasted. As the band wrapped up, Miss Evelyn took the makeshift stage, a wooden platform under an oak, and grabbed a megaphone. "Y'all, this garden's a testament to love," she said, her voice booming. "Not just for our land, but for each other. Zuri, Xavier, get your asses up here." The crowd cheered, and Zuri's stomach flipped, sensing something big. Xavier's grin turned nervous, his hand squeezing hers as they climbed onto the platform, the sun blazing behind them. The garden was a sea of faces, her parents, Tasha, Marcus, kids clutching vegetables, elders nodding approval. Miss Evelyn handed Xavier the megaphone, her eyes twinkling like she knew a secret. He cleared his throat, the mic crackling, and turned to Zuri, his face open, vulnerable in a way that stopped her breath. "Zuri Johnson," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "6 months ago, I was a man lost in code, chasing deals that didn't mean shit. Then you walked onto that plane, saved my sorry ass, and showed me what matters: love, community, a life worth living." The crowd hushed, the only sound the rustle of leaves and the distant thump of a drum. Zuri's heart pounded, her eyes locked on his, sensing what was coming. He dropped to one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket, and the crowd gasped, a ripple of excitement spreading. Inside was a silver ring, etched with an adinkra symbol matching her strength, but paired with love, a design he'd had made just for her. "You taught me what home feels like," he said, his voice breaking, raw with emotion. "You're my heart, my fire, my everything. Zuri, will you marry me?" Her breath caught, tears spilling over as the crowd erupted, whistles and cheers shaking the garden. The sunlight haloed his face, his eyes shining with a love she couldn't doubt. And she saw their journey flash before her, the plain, the rain-soaked bayou, the fights and the forgiveness. She'd been scared to love again. But Xavier had fought for her, not with money or charm, but with his soul, planting roots in her world, becoming hers in every way that mattered. Yes, she said, her voice clear, strong, cutting through the noise. Hell yes. Xavier. He slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands trembling, and stood, pulling her into a kiss that drowned out the world. Her arms wrapped around his neck, her body molding to his, and the crowd roared, the band striking up a triumphant Sweet Caroline. His lips were warm, tasting of mint and promise, and she felt his heartbeat through his shirt, a steady anchor. The sun warmed their skin, the grass soft under their feet, and the scent of earth and jambalaya wrapped them in a cocoon of home. They pulled back, breathless, foreheads touching, and Zuri laughed, a sound bright as the New Orleans sky. You're stuck with me now. Wittmann, she said, her voice thick with joy. Good, he said, his grin wide, his hands still on her waist. Ain't nowhere else I'd rather be. The festival surged back to life, neighbors rushing to congratulate them, Tasha whooping like a teenager, her parents beaming with pride. Miss Evelyn clapped Xavier's shoulder, saying, "Took you long enough, boy," and Marcus handed them beers, his grin sly. Told you she'd say yes. Man, now don't fuck it up. As the sun dipped low, casting the garden in a golden glow, Zuri and Xavier slipped away to their new Creole cottage, a short walk from the festival. The house was theirs, peeling paint, warped floors, and all with a front porch where they'd already spent nights dreaming of the future. Inside, the living room was half unpacked, boxes stacked beside a turntable spinning Nina Simone's Feeling Good. Zuri kicked off her sandals, her dress swaying as she turned to Xavier, the new ring heavy on her finger. "Dance with me," she said, her voice soft, a command wrapped in love. He didn't hesitate, pulling her close, their bodies swaying to the slow, sultry notes. The moonlight streamed through the open windows, painting their skin in silver, and the creak of the floorboards mingled with Nina's velvet voice. His hands slid to her hips, fingers tracing the curve through her dress, and she leaned into him, her cheek against his chest, feeling the warmth of his skin through the linen. His breath grazed her temple, a soft hitch that sent a shiver down her spine, and she tilted her head, her lips brushing his jaw, the stubble rough and grounding. "You're my home, Xavier," she murmured, her hands sliding up his back, feeling the muscle beneath his shirt. "Took a damn kidney stone to get us here." "Huh?" He laughed, low and warm, his fingers tightening on her hips. "Best pain I ever felt," he said, his lips finding her neck, a slow, deliberate kiss that made her gasp. The dress was thin, and his touch was a spark, igniting a heat that spread through her. She pulled him closer, their bodies pressed tight, and the music faded to a hum, the world narrowing to the rhythm of their breaths, the soft clink of her beads, the way his hands trembled like he was holding something holy. "We got forever. Wittmann," she said, pulling back to meet his eyes, her smile teasing, but full of love. "You ready for that? Born ready," he said, and kissed her again. Lighter this time, a promise sealed in the quiet of their new home. She laughed, pushing him toward the stairs with a playful shove. "We'll see about that. Fiancé, later." As they sat on the porch, beers in hand, the festival's distant music floating through the night, Zuri leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. The stars were bright, the air cool with the promise of fall, and she felt whole, like every piece of her nurse, singer, daughter, lover had found its place. Xavier's hand rested on hers, the new ring glinting beside her grandma's, a bridge between past and future. "You ever think about what's next?" she asked, her voice soft, the question hanging light between them. "Every damn day," he said, his thumb brushing her ring. "A life with you. Kids running through this house, maybe a few more gardens, and that app gonna get it in every clinic from here to Baton Rouge." She smiled, her heart full. "And I'm gonna keep singing, keep nursing. Maybe start that choir program for the kids, like Mama always wanted. We'll do it all," he said, his voice sure, his arm tightening around her, together. They stayed there, the city humming beyond the porch, a song of resilience and love. Zuri thought of Claude, of Miss Ruby, of the patients who taught her that life was too short for anything less than the real thing. She'd found it with Xavier, not by chance, but by choice, by fighting through the doubts, the pain, the world's noise to build something unbreakable, from a plane to forever. Zuri and Xavier built a love that shakes the soul of New Orleans. They fought, they fell, and they rose together, rooted in a community that's stronger than any storm. What's the craziest thing love's made you do? Spill it in the comments. Y'all, let's hear your stories. And smash that subscribe button for more tales that'll hit you right in the feels. Catch you next time.